Konnichiwa. Today we're going to discuss some pitfalls in Japanese structure. These are very small elements, single kana elements of the language, but very vital ones that can, if you don't know about them, be very confusing because one element can be easily confused with another one that looks identical. And the textbooks in many cases don't tell you about this at all. They leave you completely floundering. The first one we're going to look at is de. Now, de, as you know, is a logical particle. It has a very clearly defined use, which we introduced in lesson 8b. Like all logical particles, it marks a noun, and it tells us that that noun is the place where an action took place, or the means by which an action was done. However, there is another de, which is not a particle, which is also used very frequently in Japanese, and the textbooks make no attempt to distinguish these two completely different but identical looking elements. The first time most of us will meet the second of these des is in the use of adjectival nouns, which are very confusingly and misleadingly called na adjectives by the textbooks. So if we say, Sakura ga kirei de yasashii, what we're saying is that Sakura is pretty and kind. Kireida is an adjectival noun. If we want to say the flower is pretty, we say hana ga kireida. And if we want to say the pretty flower, we have to put kireida on the other side of the flower, so we say kirei na hana, and that na, as we know, is the connective form of da. But if we want to say Sakura is pretty and kind, we can't use da and we can't use na, but we do have to use the copula. What we use now is the connective form of the copula, that is to say its te form, and the te form of da is de. So if you say Sakura is beautiful and kind, this is a true adjective, an a adjective, and we use the te form to connect it. We say Sakura ga utsukushiku te yasashi. If it's an adjectival noun, we still have to have the copula, so we say Sakura ga kirei de. That's the te form of the copula. Now, I've already explained that in our lessons on adjectivals, but we also find this de, the te form of da, in lots of other cases in Japanese. So let's take a couple of cases and see if you can tell which of the two des is being used. A very common thing to say to someone when you're leaving them, perhaps for a while, is o genki de. Now, genki, as you know, means well or healthy or lively, and the o is just an honorific or prettifier. What is the de here? Is this the logical particle, or is it the te form of the copula? This is the te form of the copula, not the particle. The particle doesn't make any sense here, does it? What's the te form of the copula doing? Well, we know, don't we, that the te form is often used to make an imperative, to tell someone or ask someone to do something. So, if we say, Matte, wait, this is kind of short for matte kudasai, and we're asking someone to wait. Matte, wait. Now, it's exactly the same with de, which is the te form of the copula. So, genki da means is genki. Someone is genki. Someone is healthy or lively. Genki de is telling them to be genki or lively. O genki de. Be healthy. Be lively. Keep up the good spirits. Right, so here's another one. Buji de yokatta is another very common expression, and it means I'm glad that you're alright. It's good that you weren't harmed. It's good that you're safe. Buji de yokata. What do we have here? Once again, we have the te form of the copula, buji, which means literally no incident, and therefore it means nothing happened, nothing bad happened, you weren't harmed, you're safe. So bujida means you're safe, you weren't harmed, nothing happened. Bujide is turning that da, that copula, into the connective form. We use the te form to connect things, don't we? So, just as we might say, osoku natte sumimasen, that I came late, I'm sorry, we also say buji de yokatta, that you weren't hurt, that was good. And this connective te form is also used in longer compound sentences. So, for example, we might say, Sakura wa iko de mainichi gakkou ni iku. Sakura is a good child, and she goes to school every day. We have two complete clauses, and just as with the te form of any verb, we can use it to connect that verb ending clause to a second clause, so we can do exactly the same thing with the copula. So, Sakura ga iko da, Sakura is a good girl, is a complete sentence in itself. If we want to connect it to a second clause to make it the first half of a compound sentence, we turn that da into its te form, de. So Sakura is a good girl, and she goes to school every day. And as is usual with the te form connector, it tends to imply a positive relation between the two. It has this implication of because Sakura is a good girl, she goes to school every day. But it's not stating it as strongly as if we'd used kara. Now, another confusion, which is not kept such a deep, dark secret by the textbooks, but they don't always stress it clearly enough. And it's very important because it concerns the very center of the Japanese language, and that is the ga particle. The ga particle, as we know, is the one particle that no sentence or clause in Japanese can ever be without, whether we can see it or whether we can't. Ga marks the a-car of every sentence, the doer of an A does be clause, and the beer of an A is be clause. But there is also another ga. It's not easy to confuse the two, provided you're clearly aware of them. The other ga is also a clause connector, and usually it's a contrastive clause connector. So, if we say, Omise ni itta ga pan ga nakatta, we're saying, I went to the shops, but there wasn't any bread. So this is a contrastive conjunction. We went to the shops, hoping that there would be bread, but there wasn't any. It's not possible to confuse this with the other ga, the ga that marks the subject of the sentence, the a-car, because that ga, the particle ga, can only ever mark a noun, and the clause connector ga can only ever mark a complete sentence. The particle ga can't mark a complete sentence, because a complete sentence can't end with a noun. It has to end with a verb, an adjective, or a copula, as we learned in our very first lesson. So it's not possible to confuse these two so long as you're clearly aware of them. One more thing that we should note is that ga doesn't have to be contrastive. Most of the time it is, but it can be used as a regular, non-contrastive conjunction. It's worth knowing that, because if you see it connecting to clauses, and there doesn't seem to be any contrast there, you don't have to rack your brains to find the contrast. Occasionally it is used in a non-contrastive manner. And the other thing you need to know is that you will sometimes find this contrastive ga at the end of a sentence. And I have talked before about sentences that end in a conjunction. Strictly, they're not complete because what they're doing is implying a following clause. Ga at the end of a sentence is often a politeness because ga is in fact more polite than kedo or demo, the other ways of saying but. So if we said something like kohi ga hoshii ga, coffee is want making to me, and then we've added ga. And what that ga is doing is saying but, and it's implying a second clause but not stating it. So kohi ga hoshii ga means something like, I would like coffee, but if it's any trouble, please don't try to get me any coffee, or something along those lines. The last one we're going to consider is less common, but if you're reading any amount of Japanese, you're going to come across it pretty soon, and that is ni. Now, we know ni, it's again a logical particle, it's the targeting particle, and I've done a whole video on this because it's an important and complex particle, but there is also another ni. And this other ni, which is a slightly old usage, it comes from older Japanese, it means the same as to. It can be used to and together two nouns or a list of nouns. So in the folk tale Beauty and the Beast, when the father asks one of the less good sisters what she would like him to bring back for her, she says, Kutsu ni yubi wa ni boshi. She's saying she would like shoes and a ring and a hat. So this ni can be used to and together two things or a list of things, and it's completely different from the particle ni. It's a little bit literary, so you're more often going to see it in written Japanese, but if you don't know that it's there, you can spend a long time puzzling over what ni means in these contexts. It's also more commonly used in the expression sore ni, which means furthermore or in addition to that. And as you can see, this is made up of sore, which means that, plus ni, not the particle ni, but the ni that means and. So, have you seen any apparent particles or parts of Japanese that don't seem to be doing what they ought to be doing? If so, put them in the comments below and I will do my best to clear up the problem. If you have any other questions or comments, please also put those in the comments below and I will answer as usual. I'd like to thank my gold Kokeshi patrons, my producer angels who make these videos possible, and all my patrons and supporters on Patreon and everywhere. You'll find a list of my red Kokeshi patrons in the information section below. And I'd like to thank you for attending this lesson. Korekara mo yoroshiku onegai shimasu. Class dismissed.